In today's video, we're going to do a very short and brief introduction to algebra. We'll keep it as simple as possible, and this is good for students who are new to the subject or are having trouble grasping those first steps into algebra. So the idea in algebra is that you can assign a letter to a number that you don't know, and then later you can solve to find out what that letter actually is or what number it represents. So for example, you could have a problem where you were told that a number plus 3 is equal to 7. You don't know what that number is. Maybe you can figure that problem out in your head, but the idea is it gets more complicated, and algebra is a way to solve the situation when things become more complicated. So back to our problem. A number plus 3 is equal to 7. You could just write that number as x. So I don't know what it is. Let's call it x. We'll add 3 to that number, and it's equal to 7. So that's what our word problem starts out as. Now, algebra is a way of changing things around in this equation in order to find what this number x is. Now, we call this an equation because there's an equal sign here. And the idea is that the right-hand side is equal to the left-hand side. Even though it's obvious here that we have a 7, this other side is also 7 in total, but we've sort of written it in a different way where there's some unknown number plus 3. But both sides are equal to 7. Now we can change this equation, and our goal is to end up with x on one side and everything else on the other side, and then we'll know what x is. And importantly, we cannot have any x's on this side or we're still not done the problem. Okay, so let's go on to the next step of this problem. If I want to find what x is, I can try to make the left side simpler by subtracting 3. So I could say x plus 3 subtract 3 is equal to, now what goes on over here, I have to put 7, and I better subtract 3 here as well, or else both sides would no longer be equal. If I subtract 3 over on the left, I have to subtract 3 on the right as well. Now I chose to subtract 3 because that exactly cancels out the 3 that was added here. So x plus 3 subtract 3 is just the same as x plus 0. No use writing plus 0, you could just leave it as x. So all that ends up left on the left side of this equation is the x, because this plus 3 cancels out with the negative 3, or the subtraction of 3. Okay, so we've got x on the left, and on the right we can work out what's left. 7 minus 3, that's 4. Okay. Now, what if we have a slightly harder problem? What if somebody tells us that adding 3 to twice a number gives us 7? So we want to add 3 to twice a number, and that has to be 7. Okay. So one thing students sometimes get puzzled by is, what should I deal with first? Should I deal with this 3 or should I deal with this 2 that showed up? And the answer is you have to deal with the 3 first. So before we can try to manage any numbers that show up in front of this unknown number x, we first need to remove this to the other side. So again, we'll subtract 3 from both sides. 2x plus 3 minus 3 equals 7 minus 3. Again, the plus 3 cancels with the minus 3. And but this time we have 2x instead of just a single x. And the right side works out to 7 minus 3 equals 4. Now, how to deal with the 2 in front of the x? You might think, well, I could subtract an x and then I'd only have one x left. But that's not the way to go. because 2x subtract x. Sure, that'll leave me with 1x on the left side, which is our end goal, but then we end up with this x over here, which is unhelpful. So there's nothing wrong in doing that step, it just doesn't lead you to the place you want to go. We want to go somewhere like we found above, where we just have x on one side and the number on the other side. Okay, so let's back up and forget about that step. This time, we'll try something else, and another idea would be to divide by 2. If you've got 2 x's, half of them would just be 1x. So we divide both sides by 2. I like to write that just as putting it as a fraction over 2. And that's going to equal 4 over 2. And 2x over 2 just leaves the x. And 4 divided by 2 is just 2. One nice thing about algebra is you can always check that your answer is correct. So where we found above x equals 4, you can put this 4 right back where you started, and it better work out so that it gives you the 7 again. You can see that it does. And same with this 2. We can stick that in for the x, and it better work out to 7 or we got the wrong answer. So when you're doing a test, you can always check your answers and see if you got it correct. Okay, one more slightly different situation I'd like to describe is how about if we add 3 to the number and then multiply by 2? How would we solve for x then? So in this case, we add 3 to the number and then multiply by 2. So if you remember our order of operations, this means the 3 is added first, then 2 gets multiplied by the entire bracket. And let's set that equal to 7 again. Our answer might not work out to be a whole number, but that's okay. Sometimes in algebra, your answer is a fraction, or a decimal, or any other kind of answer that's possible. So this time, you might think you could subtract 3, but the thing is that 3 is hiding in the bracket. And when you're working on the left side, you have to go in reverse order from what you would do in a BEDMAS calculation or an order of operations. So if we wanted to figure this out, we add 3 first, then multiply by 2. To undo the left side, we have to first divide by 2, and then we'll deal with the 3 after. Okay, so what we see here is 2 multiplied by an entire bracketed term. We're going to first divide by 2. Okay, so let's do this slowly and write the whole thing out. I'm going to divide this whole side by 2. I also have to divide the other side by 2 so that they stay equal. And 2 times this bracket divided by 2, we'll just leave one of those brackets. Just like 2x is divided by 2, just left a single x. If we multiply this bracket by 2 and divide by 2, it just leaves the bracket behind. One way to think of this is a 2 on top of that fraction cancels the 2 on the bottom. And we could have done that here as well. Okay, so the next line we would write on this problem is x plus 3 equals 7 over 2. And, well, let's write that as a mixed number instead of an improper fraction. 7 over 2, the 2 goes into 7 3 times, but leaves 1 over. 7 over 2 is the same as 3.5. And now, just like in our first problem, we want to get an x left all by itself. We need to subtract this 3 to get rid of it. So x plus 3 subtract 3 is equal to 3.5 subtract 3. So this plus 3 cancels with the minus 3, and we're left with an x equals 1/2. And again, you can check that. Put that half up in there. 3 plus 1/2 gives me 3.5 times 2. Yes, that's 7. Okay, I will end this video here, and I'm going to make a follow-up video that has a series of increasingly difficult algebra problems. So I will look for that video as well.